to move really fast to my presentation. This presentation is going to have two parts. The first part is going to be just me here introducing the concept of speciesism and showing some clips from a movie. I don't know if some of you are familiar with it. It's a documentary called Speciesism, the movie. It was released in 2013, the same year Sabina Berman's novel, Me Who Dove Into the Heart of the World, was published. And we're going to find some common elements. We will discuss the concept of speciesism. So after I introduce it, I will have my two students here, and they will debate the concept. Feel free to jump in. You are invited to participate in the debate with them. So, to define the term speciesism, many people associate it with such terms as racist or sexist or anti-Semitism. So it's discrimination in favor of one species, usually the human species, over another, especially the exploitation and mistreatment of animals like humans. This is how it's defined. So the word discrimination is crucial here. The first time this term was used was in 1970, as early as 1970, by a British psychologist, and then it became more popular in 1975 with the publication of the book Animal Liberation by Peter Singer. You will see Peter Singer today in Speciesism, the movie. He's an Australian psychologist. I'm sorry, philosopher. Like racism and sexism, speciesism was coined at one point. I'm sure there are probably people today who believe their race is better than others, or men who believe they're better than women, but they know what they are. Even if they still believe that, they know there's a label for them. Speciesism, on the other hand, not so much. There may be a lot of species among you, but you don't know your species. So let's see if, and the documentarian, Mark de Vries, was one of them, but by the time he finished the documentary, he changed his mind. So, the two works that we're going to focus on today are going to be Mark de Vries' documentary, Speciesism, the movie, and Sabina Berman's novel. I hope most of you are familiar with it, Me Who Dove Into the Heart of the World. A few words about, I'm going to show you some crucial clips from the film, but before that, I just want to tell you a few things about the director. His name is Mark de Vries, and he started making this documentary when he was 20 years old. He was in college at George Washington University. He was a psychology student, and he was getting ready to go to law school. And those PETA people with their naked girls kind of caught his attention. And at first he thought it was stupid, they were attention seekers, and he's trying to do an expose on these people who are just trying to get attention. For what? They're just animals. What are you talking about? So as he started to question them, he got to meet with people with, he went and saw some animal farms, and he realized that they were right about the mistreatment of animals. And then he was trying to talk with some philosophers, law professors, and see how the concept of speciesism might be applied to that. Do we have the right to mistreat, to torture animals or not, even if it's for food? So by the end of the film, he became an anti-speciesist. I hope that made it kind of clear. If not, his documentary hopefully is going to do that. The documentary was called part Animal Rights Expose and part Philosophy Lecture. So I kind of used the titles. The titles are my own, just to help you out with understanding what he's trying to do there. So I'm going to just let Mark tell you a little more about speciesism and his experiences.
Pretty clear idea of how the world works. Not everything in the world, but just the basics of life. I was wrong. It started to change when I came across something that looked fairly innocuous. And pretty stupid, actually. Hold on a second. Let me give you some background. What are they getting all this attention for?
A lot of people who are basically intelligent, who are living upstanding lives. And they're intelligent people who are making good livings, who are politically aware, and they just have absolutely no idea of what's happening on factory farms or what's happening in vivisection labs. They just have no idea.
Factory farms? So I decided to go get an idea. I left PETA behind and visited the offices of Compassion Over Killing, an organization that does undercover investigations into the egg industry.
They noticed that when they started putting all these birds so confined and intensely confined in cages, that the birds would, out of frustration, start pecking at each other. Birds have a natural pecking order that most people are aware of. So in acting out this pecking order, if a bird who's on the lower end of the pecking scale can't get away, she keeps getting pecked at and pecked at and pecked at. So to prevent that, they started debeaking birds, overcrowding, injuries and illness, dead birds, any egg farm that you will visit. You will find.
How can I prove you're not lying?
You can go to an egg farm yourself.
We're looking for the right person. This is my show.
Come onto our property.
Huh?
You cannot come onto our property.
And at all? Was there any way that maybe if we tell you beforehand we can come back and visit? Oh.
We don't let anyone in our chicken houses.
Oh, well, is there a reason? Is there some way? Because what we're trying to do is disprove the people who say that there's something wrong with the treatment of animals, that it's bullshit, you know what I mean? So is there anything that we could do kind of to show that? Maybe we can visit, or maybe we can give you the camera and you can come in?
No. I mean, I don't know who you are.
Okay.
But we just don't let strangers on the property, especially taking pictures.
Okay.
We don't mistreat our chickens.
Like how big are the
The
cages?
cages are fairly large.
So about how big for a number of chickens?
I don't know.
This
It's
for
my
you?
husband's deal.
So you haven't seen the cages?
I've been in there, but I couldn't tell you the measurements. And we have different size cages. But they have plenty of room.
Maybe a guess?
I can't even guess.
Okay. So what about that slicing beak thing? That's not true either, right?
They do that so the chicken doesn't kill off the other chicken.
It's probably something that emerged early in the evolution of animals.
So being able to experience pain is not even close to being uniquely human.
Oh, far from. It's probably almost universal in anything that has a nervous system.
Then I visited Dr. Mark Beckoff, a well-known expert on animal emotions. He lives somewhere in the mountains in Colorado.
Well, I start a lot of my lectures saying this. Anybody here think that dogs don't feel joy? And even at scientific meetings, no hands go up. Nobody in their right mind can think that dogs don't feel joy or that chimpanzees don't grieve. And the neurobiology and the ethology support that. The limbic system is a part of the brain that's important in processing emotions. And all mammals have it, and it's structurally pretty much the same, and also the same neurochemicals.
So animals seem to be capable of experiencing physical sensations and capable of experiencing emotions. It can't possibly be as intense as human physical sensations or human emotions.
It may be more intense because, for example, I can rationalize my fears.
Animal emotions could be even more intense than human emotions. Because we like to say that they're unfiltered.
Human emotions are what drive our entire lives, and intense emotions, and that's what life is practically.
Right.
So if you're saying that other members of other species can experience emotions maybe even more intensely than humans, then what does that mean?
Well, it means that we grossly underestimate the extent to which animals may be suffering. From an ethical standpoint, we need to give them the benefit of the doubt. Just as we would if we came across a human being with whom we had no means of verbal communication. Most of the animals that you eat are living in nondescript, very large sheds that look like a bit like warehouses. They're windowless, so you can't see into them, and they contain thousands upon thousands of animals.
Experts, you can see what they're talking about.
The thing that moved me most in factory farming is egg farming. you have anything from 3 to 5 birds in a cage, and the amount of space allocated for them means that they really can't do anything. They're just compressed into that space. Their feet get damaged from standing on the wire all the time.
They're actually standing on wires in these cages, and have no way of getting out of these cages. For how long?
Well, the lifespan of the average battery chicken is less than 2 years.
But years in these
Oh,
cages?
yeah.
Thousands are kept in a single shed.
Because they're in such large numbers and so densely stocked, they tend to pick on each other, they tend to peck each other. They have been selected to eat lots and lots of food and grow very rapidly, so they put on weight extremely quickly. Essentially, they're putting on weight before their bones are fully hardened, so they're still very young and they have soft bones. And what happens then is that where the joints of the bones join, you get abrasion, you get arthritis, osteoarthritis forming. The birds then become lame, progressively more and more lame, until eventually some of them can't walk at all.
Why do they become lame or can't walk? Because it's so painful?
Because of the pain in the joints, yes. Some of them can't even walk. I mean, they just sit on the ground.
Just because of
the pain.
Well, there's a big percentage of dairy cows that are in total confinement and they don't go out on pasture at all. And I've seen a lot of welfare problems. A lot of lameness. Lameness in the national dairy herd right now is 24%.
lameness meaning like they can't.
Well, lameness, they have difficulty walking. Sore feet, sore legs, on the walk, but you still in there.
Even worse, I found out that many of them can't walk at all by the time they reach slaughter because of the high levels of physical stress during their lifetimes. Large numbers also suffer from a painful udder infection called mastitis. One of the symptoms of mastitis is pus and blood ending up in the milk.
Obviously, the bond between mothers and their infants is very strong, not just in humans, but in all mammals. In order to maintain that milk production, we have to let them have a calf from time to time. We don't want them nursing the calves because we want the milk, so the calf is taken away very soon after it's born. And this causes the cow a great deal of distress, and it obviously causes the calf a great deal of distress. Sometimes the calf is put in a little kind of kennel within earshot of the mother, so the mother can hear the calf call, and the cows will call to the calves. So there's this back and forth going on, and it's quite distressing to listen to, actually.
Have you heard it?
Oh yes, oh yes.
It got me thinking, what if I could go back into the past and speak with these people before they were farmers? Well, there's a place for everything. The Future Farmers of America Convention in Indianapolis, Indiana, for people who are going to be farmers in the future. FFA now goes way beyond future farmers, but there was still more than enough present.
Well, I think it's like cruel that, we have 9,000 homes and 2 buildings. There's like 100 pigs per pen. But if it wasn't good for the pigs, they wouldn't be doing it.
And it also feeds our honest people.
Yes, it does indeed.
Animal legislation like out in California and these I'm not particularly fond of it. It's all about money when you get down to it. And when it costs more than it gives, then it's not worth having.
So I thought I had it all figured out, and I was about to pack up when Bruce said something very unexpected.
So when you take this idea, I want to make sure that I can do this to you, and so I'm going to do this to you. The pinnacle of that form of bigotry, the pinnacle of that form of racism, is speciesism.
Wait a second. What? It turns out that there's way more going on behind all this. There's a much deeper philosophical issue. I went to Raleigh, North Carolina, home of the world's largest acorn.
What do you think of it?
It looks good.
And also home of Dr. Tom Reagan, author of the influential book, The Case for Animal Rights. Back in New York City, I spoke with Gail Jamieson, director of the Center for Environmental Studies at New York University. Then I went to Washington, D.C. to speak with David DeGrazia, chair of the Department of Philosophy at George Washington University. I also went to Ithaca, New York to speak with Sherry Kolb, a professor at Cornell Law School, and Newark, New Jersey to visit Gary Francione, a professor at Rutgers School of Law.
If we think about what is most clear and certain in ethics, what basic ideas are accepted by all moral systems regardless of their major differences, it's that we shouldn't cause harm without very good reason.
The harm principle basically says everything else being equal, it's wrong to cause harm.
Speciesism is the use of species to exclude certain beings from the moral community who are relevant and similar to members of the moral community, and you base that exclusion on species alone. It's like racism or sexism. You have relevant and similar individuals, some of whom are in the moral community, some of whom are excluded on the basis of race or sex.
Speciesism, as I understand it, is excluding members of different species from ours from the realm of moral concern just because those individuals are members of other species.
The core idea of speciesism is really the same, or at least analogous to the core idea of sexism and racism, namely that it's a prejudice in favor of one's own kind against others.
Peter Singer is credited with founding animal rights through his 1975 book, Animal Liberation.
There aren't many philosophy books that have been more significant in terms of changing the world and changing people. It's almost impossible to overstate its significance.
He's now professor of bioethics at Princeton University and considered one of the most influential philosophers alive.
I entitled the first chapter of Animal Liberation, All Animals Are Equal. And what I meant by that was that we ought to give them all equal consideration of their interests, whatever their interests might be. That doesn't mean that you give them equal treatment because they have different interests. As long as they have interests, for example, the interest in not feeling pain, it should be irrelevant whether they're members of the species Homo sapien or Pan troglodytes, the chimpanzee, or Gallus domesticus, the common chicken, or whatever. I mean, what's that got to do with how bad it is for them to feel pain?
Obviously, there's got to be something wrong with their argument. So I did all of my research and made every objection that I could find.
Isn't it just natural for us to use other animals?
Well, the problem with the concept of the natural is that it means many, many different things.
Maybe war is natural. There's a good argument for saying that war is natural to human beings, that we've always done it as long as far back as you can go. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try and stop it. We see the costs of war, we see the suffering involved, and we do our best to prevent wars.
Rape may be natural. The rape by powerful males may be natural in some sense and biologically adapted, but it's the last thing in the world that can be morally justified.
I couldn't find anyone who thought there was a way to make nature into an ethical argument. Then, finally, I found someone.
Yes, we're still around. The SS never actually died, and the SS is still flourishing. When a man can take a beaten, broken, flattened out country, and in less than 4 years make that country into one of the greatest world powers that there ever was, then most unfortunately we have to overlook a lot of other things, and we have to accept success.
The man overlooking those few things is Lieutenant Snyder, a high-ranking officer in America's Nazi Party.
Why should we follow laws of nature?
Nature is smarter than we give nature credit for. When you come right down to it, nature is a lot wiser than we are. Any kind of deliberate wrongdoing, once I say it, by the laws of nature, should be naturally curbed and stopped permanently. A second time caught in this country illegally should warrant immediate execution.
Okay, I guess that doesn't work. But there must be something special about humans. I mean, we're smarter.
Well, most of us aren't. Babies aren't. The mentally disadvantaged of all ages aren't. If you're going to say that intelligence is a basis for inclusion in the moral community, and you're going to say that non-human primates are more intelligent than some human beings, but they don't belong as members of the moral community. But those human beings do, and say, that looks like a contradiction to me.
No, that doesn't work either. How about animals have no conception of morality, so why should they be included in it?
Well, infants have no conception of morality.
We don't say of them, that is the babies and those who are seriously mentally disadvantaged, we don't say, well, we're at liberty to do anything we want to them. They must exist for us then.
Damn, they got me again. I must be missing something obvious here, so I decided to get out of my head and just ask around. Do you think that the suffering of humans is more important ethically than the suffering of other animals? Yes. And what is it about humans that justifies
that we have higher capabilities and we have more rights under the law?
What do you mean by higher capabilities?
Mental capabilities.
There are many humans who have higher capabilities. There are many intellectually disabled humans.
Yes, I know.
Human beings are more important than animals.
Based on what?
I can relate to human beings more than I can relate to animals.
So if somebody else, so it's because we're a member of this group. So if somebody else said, well, I'm white, so blacks are less important, would that be ethical? So,
it doesn't matter what color you are, you're still a human being.
Right, so what is it that's special about human beings? Since you said that the reason is just because you're a member of the group of human beings.
So far, our legal system just represents humans.
Right, and once it so far represented white men. So the legal system is a reason.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. So.
If you were to walk backwards down through your ancestral tree, starting with your mother, and then your grandmother, great-grandmother, let's just stick to females for convenience, great-great-grandmother, and so on. You would go back and back and back and back and back, go back as far as you like. Gradually, the animals that you were walking past, as you walk past your ancestors, would be gradually, ever so slowly changing into something else. By the time you got back to about 6 or 7 million years ago, you would be looking at an animal which was the common ancestor between ourselves and chimpanzees.
Yes, Professor Dawkins, the extraordinary similarities between ourselves and other species that evolutionary biology helps us understand, do you think it has an ethical implication in terms of our treatment of non-human animals? I mean, in my understanding, you are not a speciesist.
I think it does have ethical implications. If you think about the way in which we give special treatment to humans, for example, in the case of abortion, human fetuses are treated as babies. And a lot of people think that it's murder to abort a human fetus, whereas they quite happily go and eat a cow. Which of course has much more capacity to suffer than any human fetus.
Every year, the Church of St. John the Divine in New York has a beautiful St. Francis Day celebration, complete with an animal parade and this guy, for some reason. Then, hundreds of people line up to get their own companion animals blessed.
I brought him here today to get blessed, and I've been praying to the Lord for a miracle. He has kidney failure. I think it's a miracle that something like dialysis is available for pets. If your aunt or uncle had kidney failure, they would get medical treatment. So I feel the same for animals, the companion animals.
I was wondering if you could do a blessing for all chickens. There are too many for me to bring them, so I was wondering if you could do some sort of a blessing for them. I know they're in sheds and cages and so forth. What can I do?
The first thing you should do if you're opposed to the killing of animals in factory farms is to stop supporting it. And as long as you buy the products of factory farms, as long as you consume them or therefore get other people to buy them for you, that's all the support it needs from you.
So if I'm not going to buy from factory farms, what about all those humane farms I hear about? I found a humane farm that sells to one of the most reputable companies, Whole Foods, and it's described on the Whole Foods website as free range. The owner even took me around.
We're doing things to Whole Food standards, which are high.
Very high.
Humane standards.
The best.
And then also, I think they're probably, if not the strictest, one of the strictest standards. So we're offering quality products that are raised more naturally for people that are looking for that type of product.
How much space per bird is it?
About 3 square foot.
Compared to like a regular large operation, this is a lot. To be able to sell the Whole Foods, you got to go through a lot. It's very strict standards. If you have more than 1% fail rate on your stunning, you fail. If you have more than 1% broken wings, you also would fail the audit.
Actually, this is very modern.
It's like my rabbit's box.
Yeah. When I'm loading out litter with the skid loader and stirring in it, and that really gets it going, then I'll just wear a respirator, one of those ammonia respirators. That just filters it all out, because it'll bother your throat. It's not good for you.
But here again, with more space, our numbers are usually very low. The ammonia levels are usually very low. Turkeys are somewhat, they are like cannibalistic.
So some have their own turkeys and have like 3 or 4 of them that might have that problem?
Probably not. Like we don't get much of that because of the extra room we get in.
Oh really?
Yeah.
So because of the extra room, they're not as likely?
It doesn't seem to be as bad.
Why do they grow so much faster?
Just advances in genetics, selecting the birds that grow faster.
Are there any problems because they grow fast?
You can get like leg issues in the males, like when they get in your market. They'll go down on the leg.
If animals are in moral community, then we have to give their interests equal consideration. If animals are property, it becomes impossible to give their interests equal consideration. Think about it for a second. When you are weighing the interests of a piece of property against those of a property owner, you're always going to weigh the interests of property as less than the interests of the property owner. So just as in the case of human slavery, there were all sorts of laws that supposedly protected human slaves. But they didn't work. And they didn't work because you were trying to balance the interests of slaves against the interests of slave owners.
Somehow, I had just never thought about that contradiction between considering the well-being of other animals comparably important to our own well-being and then using them as economic commodities.
It's also true that if you're eating meat, you're entering into a contract relationship whereby you are paying other people to mutilate animals without pain relief, even on the best farms, to slice animals' throats open without pain relief. You're paying people to abuse animals if you're eating meat. So you can't reconcile those. You can't say, I'm somebody who opposes cruelty to animals, and yet I consider it to be acceptable to pay other people in this mercenary relationship to go out and slit animals' throats for something so inconsequential as a palate preference. It's the ultimate subjugation.
This is Francia, a vegan restaurant in Manhattan.
I'm Terry Choi, the owner of this restaurant, and I've been a vegan for more than 15 years. Soy chicken sticks has batter on the chicken and is slightly fried. We dip the chicken in a barbecue sauce, and this is our lobster ball sticks. The texture of the lobster ball is very similar to an actual lobster. This is our cheesecake. Everybody loves the cheesecake. It's totally non-dairy. We get comments like, oh my God, this is a vegan cheesecake. We didn't know that it tastes, even better than the real cheesecake.
People really say, oh my
yes.
God. So we decided to test that proposition. It's lobster.
Is that what it is?
It's vegetarian. It's not really lobster.
It's real.
Can I have the rest of it?
If you go to the supermarkets like Whole Foods or some of the health stores, you can get...
Okay, you get the general idea, right? Did you pick a side yet? Okay. Okay, well, there's more. Before we start with the debate, but what I want to show you is how unbalanced this debate is, isn't it? I mean, did you notice who's on the side of, who goes against speciesism? Like all law professors, philosophers, Peter Singer himself, biologists. Richard Dawkins is the leading authority in evolutionary biology in the world. Probably if you're a biology major, you're familiar with his works. And then I just want to draw your attention to somebody else there, Temple Grandin. You noticed she said something about cows and how they're mistreated. I don't know if you've ever heard of her, but here are a few things about her, and we can use her as an argument against speciesism. She's famous for designing handling system for about half the cattle processing facilities in the United States. And this is something PETA said about her. Dr. Grandin's improvement to animal handling system found in slaughterhouses have decreased the amount of fear and pain that animals experience in their final hours. And she's widely considered the world's leading expert on the welfare of cattle and pigs. She did design some slaughterhouses where the animals are going in circles, so they never know where they're going. That follows their normal pattern of behavior, and they never see what's going on in front of them. And they're killed very swiftly with a stun gun to the head, so they don't feel any fear and any pain. And about 2/3 of all the slaughterhouses in the United States are using her system. Also, an interesting fact, she was diagnosed as autistic at the age of 2, and she could never speak until she was 4. Also, she experienced, as part of her disability, her neurological disability, she had panic attacks all the time. She experienced fear all the time, and the best way for her to get comfortable was to be restrained. Just like cattle are restrained when they're vaccinated. They feel comfortable when there's pressure applied to them. Also, Temple Grandin had a problem with language. She doesn't understand figurative speech. She can only understand words that name objects and relate them to the actual object. She said at one point, I didn't understand the Bible. They were talking about the power and the glory, and when I heard power, I thought, power lines, what do they have to do with that? So, does that remind you of anybody? Maybe, say, a literary character, Donna? Karen Yento. And I think probably she may have been the inspiration for the character of Karen in Me Who Dove Into the Heart of the World. That's an interesting question to ask Sabina Berman later today, maybe. But this is a very brief clip from a documentary called A Stairway to Heaven by Errol Morris, and I just want you to take a look at Temple Grandin really quickly.
Cattle walk very, very calmly into this system, sort of like people walking down jet bridge at the airport. Like meat plant and cattle just walk in nice and calmly and they're not scared. Like go on a ranch and they're handling some cattle at the ranch for their vaccinations. The animals just stay, really calm and not scared. That makes me feel happy because I know what it's like to feel fearful and scared. I can visualize myself in their body. What would it feel like pushing up against the other cattle? What would seeing out their eyes be like? That doesn't mean I'm putting myself as a person in the cow costume. What would it be like if I actually was a cow? People that are most likely to deny animals thinking are people that think entirely in language. Some people, when I ask them questions like access your memory on dogs, access your memory on church steeples or cars or whatever, they don't see any pictures. Well, if you only thought in language, you'd have a hard But if you think in pictures, well, then it's very easy to imagine. Figuring out how people act, just like figuring out how cattle act. And I had to observe and learn practical experience from people that always do, things in a predictable way. Like when I first started working at the Swift plant, I asked 90.
Okay. So that's our main feature. That's how we understand that we're not so different from animals, right? We can't say that animals don't think, they do think, but they think in images, they think in pictures, not in language because they don't have the language, but it doesn't mean that they don't think. And if you're gonna read the novel, you're gonna see that Karen Nieto in the novel, the main character, is thinking in pictures. Words don't mean anything to her. So that's what she says at one point in the novel. The novel is narrated from her perspective, it's a first-person narration. And that's what she says. The biggest difference between my aunt and me, she thinks that words are things in the world, whereas I know that they are simply pieces of sound and that the things in the world exist with no need for words, which is exactly probably how animals feel or think. And of course that's the way Karen sees the world is a way for Sabina Berman to use satire against people. She holds a mirror to people through Karen that distorts their features. Actually, she exaggerates their weaknesses, people's weaknesses, and making it funny. I'm just going to give you one example of how Karen can satirize what Berman does through Karen's perspective. Just emphasizing her inability to relate to figurative speech. At one point, she's talking to a rabbi. "Are you mated, Rabbi? Married, you mean?" He sighed. "Yes, I am very mated," he said quietly. "3 children bind me to my wife with 3 very thick ropes." The idea of 3 children binding him with ropes to his wife seemed to me a very cruel Jewish custom. So I said, "That seems very cruel." And the rabbi replied, "Life's not easy." So that's how Karen holds the mirror to us. Just by her apparent lack of understanding of how the words work. But anyway, to get to the end of the novel, her aunt at one point, and Karen, just like Temple Grandin, of course, she puts together humane ways to kill tuna, to kill fish, with a stun gun to the head, and then she builds a tuna paradise for them to multiply in captivity. So this way she increases her fishing business. But she realizes, her aunt realizes that in fact, by not understanding how animals think and feel fear, we actually are all autistic because we don't understand the relationship and the fact that we don't have the right to use them. And finally, the jellyfish connection, because the presentation has a jellyfish in the title. This is how Karen actually realizes, and at one point has an epiphany. And unlike Temple Grandin, who still uses humane ways to kill animals, Karen actually decides not to kill them anymore. After she has an experience, after her aunt dies, she wants to kill herself, and the way to kill herself is to just get into her wetsuit and go to the bottom of the ocean and never come back. But at one point, she says, "I was gone, merged with the sea, just another blue stone in the blue ocean. I was brought back by a sentence. Death doesn't do any good." So just when she was ready to die at the bottom of the ocean, she realizes that she actually wants to live. At the same time, she realizes that she was in the middle of a heart attack. And she was asphyxiating just like a fish would when they're pulled out of the water and they decompress. And at that point, she has a hallucination of an angel who grabs her hand and pulls her up to the surface. Only to realize then that it was actually a jellyfish that stunned her and gave her an electric shock, and that's how her heart started to beat again. So in a way, the jellyfish saved her life. And her conclusion at the end when she got out of the water was, "This is a trick reality thought through my heart at the center of the 360 degrees of sea and sun, not to kill." That's the conclusion of the novel, and we can safely say that yes, Karen is a speciesist from the beginning to the end. Now, to recap, because we're going to start our debate a little later than we thought, but everybody seems to be on the side of anti-speciesism, right? Except a Nazi guy and a guy on the street. That's all we have so far. So that's why we want to give a voice to any speciesists here. And I'm going to start by inviting my very bright students to the stage. We have half of them on the side of speciesism and the other half on the other side. So let's start with the anti-speciesists. Charisse? Is Charisse here? Come on. Kirsten? She's not here. She sent a recording which unfortunately isn't working today due to some technical difficulties. Elizabeth? Ayesha? And Shaquania. Okay. And now the brave ones. Akilo? Orette? Serena? Willie? And Dory. And Deb is here, nice surprise, come over here. So she's going to be another anti-speciesist. Okay, so let's start with the first question. Isn't it natural for humans, as the dominant species, to use all other species for their benefit? And maybe Serena?
So yeah, I would say that it is natural for humans to use other species, like animals, for food and for other reasons as well, because that's exactly what animals do in nature. All living organisms since the beginning of time have used each other in violent ways, in deadly ways, as well as in good ways to better themselves and to make sure that their species continues living. So I see no problem with us doing that to animals. We need to survive too.
Well, I feel like if that's the case, shouldn't they be able to rule us?
Absolutely, and if they had, the mechanisms that they had developed, as humans did, the lucky ones, and if they had the tools, sure they could fight back. And that's exactly why we will continue to use it.
I mean, some of them actually do. If you think you're defenseless and there's lion, he's hungry, he's gonna go out to eat. And I mean, in a way, that's equality. As soon as your species, in a way that one it isn't superior over the other. If I have a gun, I'm gonna shoot the lion to protect myself. But if I don't, the lion will eat me. And in a way, it's totally fair. It's not.
Yes, that was kind of the point I was trying to make. Sure.
Oh, okay. She's on the other side. Oh.
Yes, there's a microphone there if you want to. Yeah, go ahead. No?
I just didn't know what side she was on.
Oh, yeah. Probably she's going to go back and forth. Yeah. Flexibility. Yes.
About your point about the lion. When you think about it, if we're in the wild and a lion eats a human, the point is the humans are going to attack back. So how is that? If we're saying it's equal, if the lion eats a human, then we should just take it and leave it at that. We can't attack back lions for eating humans because it's supposed to be equal.
But we're not attacking the lions.
Yes, we do.
That's not what the species is. I mean, we're not going out and retaliating against the lion in nature.
You're making a point arguing that it's for survival,
But if we kill the lion, that has nothing to do with survival.
It has everything to do with survival. It's in our best interest. We, as humans, every day we get rid of things that are bad to us, whether it be insects, fungus, or
That
things
we
that
are bad to the lions.
What?
We are bad to the lions because if the lions are attacking, if we're attacking the lions to protect ourselves, and someone retaliates, the lion is protecting himself.
True, but it's all about survival of the fittest. And we are the fittest.
That's exactly my point. He's the fittest. He survived. So you have no right to go back and try to kill him.
If we're naturally more fit to survive, then we're going to go ahead and do that. Use that to our
I think Dory would want to weigh in.
Actually, my point, evolution has made humans superior. Even if we don't want to, even if it sounds cruel, we create medicine, we were able to create an airplane, we fly the world, why any pig doesn't do that? You know, why pigs don't come out and, take a fly and fly it?
But couldn't you say that while humans do have amazing findings in medicine in that we come out with new phones every month, it seems like, but that we maybe don't give the animals a chance to evolve and have their own findings and mechanisms that could help them save themselves from us?
So you are saying that we should leave them to do their things, right? And just develop.
Well, I mean,
but
why
it hasn't developed so far?
Well, why wouldn't we? If we just keep killing off all the chickens, all the cows, for our own, our own good, to have our own meals, why?
Well,
when do they have a chance?
So what we want to do with the bunch of chicken that are around and waiting for development,
Let them have a chance. See what they can come up with.
Well, let's see what the audience says.
Just for the sake of argument here, this isn't actually my side, but I would like to argue, wouldn't the purpose of evolution be for the most evolved species to further their own evolution? Like, why would we pave the way for a species further behind in terms of they can't necessarily communicate with each other in the way that we can? We can come together as groups, not as just packs, but we can come together as an entire species. Whereas, say, dogs or wolves, they're not going to band up and create a United Nations.
I would say it's very true, but I mean, isn't the whole idea equality? Isn't the idea for everything equality? So while yes, we can band together, we can help each other, and maybe we haven't witnessed a group of dogs or dogs as a species do this, isn't maybe it our duty as an evolved species to help those species that maybe aren't as evolved as us?
I also think it has a valid comparison with racism. When it came to the white race, they were more evolved when it came to technology and medicine in some sense. And when they did go to the African continent, blacks were, quote unquote, not as evolved, but we deserve the
chance. They didn't have the tools to do it. Let's send a kid to college and let's see if he can be a doctor.
You can't say that they don't have, it's not the same. Just because they do it, it's just in different forms. We don't understand their language and they don't understand ours. It doesn't mean that they can't protect themselves, take care of themselves, feed their children, do everything we do with our children. They just don't do it in the same way.
And I mean, you said send a pig to college, but didn't in Sabina Berman's book, she talked about parakeet maths, how, I mean, it might have taken him 2 years to learn some of the tricks that he learned, but he did eventually learn them.
Yeah, so he could develop, he could learn how to add and the color of things, but he actually can create a chemical, and he can do chemistry.
Many humans can't do that. I can't do chemistry.
Well, they have to do it because you have no food yourself.
I have my own limitations, and animals have their own limitations. Each person, each species is going to be slightly different.
Well, let's see what the audience says.
Yes. Thank you, Dory.
It's kind of you're both kind of right. I cannot hear. It's kind of weird that you're both kind of right. For the lion, it's a fair comparison because lions are the top predators in their environment. Humans, we are the top predators. We don't hunt like the way we used to. We're not like lions or wolves, but we've gone to the top because we are more advanced. We're smarter. We've had time to evolve. We've killed other species to get there.
Okay, maybe you can answer. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. The argument you're making, it's not as if we're saying that animals are as capable as humans or animals deserve to go to college. It's more like a basic need to not feel pain. Because they do feel pain. Like, yes, you should use them for food. Yes, you should use them for clothing if that's what you need to survive. But that doesn't mean you should torture them in order to do so.
Yes, thank you, Anna.
I think humans are on top of the food chain, and it's been proven that when we take species out of the food chain, for example, in the Yellowstone Park, they took away the wolves, and it got so bad they even changed the course of rivers. So what happens if we stop eating chickens? They're gonna overpopulate us? What are we gonna do?
But we're the one that raise chickens in such large numbers. This is our own design. This isn't natural.
Okay, and that brings us to the second question. Is it morally acceptable? Yes, maybe you're right, maybe what you said about the food chain, and you have some very good arguments, but is it morally acceptable to torture animals we use for food? Is their suffering less important than the suffering of human beings because they are different from humans? Really?
At the end of the day, I don't think that the argument is whether it's acceptable to torture. The question is whether or not their suffering is more important than our suffering. We have to determine if our survival is more important than their survival. Earlier it was mentioned about racism, how speciesism is analogous to racism. But if you were to, for example, go back into history and look at that, slavery and racism were not mutually exclusive. Slavery is something that existed long before racism did. If you were to read the book Black Over White by Luther Jordan, you would learn that racism was born from a fear that blacks would usurp their white counterparts. The same can be said for sexism, where men believed that women would eventually usurp them. On the other hand, there were matriarchal societies, societies where men and women lived completely differently except for the purposes of mating. So we have to examine that in the same aspect where speciesism is more about survival, where those constructs are not.
So morality is not that relevant.
Well, in the speciesism, one of the doctors, James Serpels, he said that pain is a universal emotion, and it's even possible for animals to feel pain more intensified than what us humans feel. So, that being said, even if we do need animals to eat, why do we need to torture them and put them through all of this? If we depend on their food to eat and to evolve, then if it's so big of a need and a demand, you shouldn't have to put them through all of this, because no matter what you do, people are going to need to eat. And there's people that spend, they say that they don't want to spend that much money on food because becoming a vegan or a vegetarian or eating whole food from Whole Foods, it's more expensive. But if you think about it, you spend so much money every day on other things like clothes and stuff that you think you need, but it's really just desires. So why not put a few extra bucks or money into paying for food that has been raised? Because not only is it unjust to these animals, but torturing the animals can also harm the meat that you're eating, and it can affect you. It affects the taste, and it also causes pain to the animal and can harm you then too.
Well, but if we go back to the whole moral foundation of the question, morality is a social construct, something that we develop as human beings. Animals have no sense of morality, so they can't really participate in that concept. if you were to compare them to babies or mentally incapable people who also don't have a sense of morality, you have to look at from a natural standpoint, species that are most like each other tend to get along better with each other, so they would have no reason to do that to each other. Take, for example, a lion and a cheetah. A lion and a cheetah would fight in the wild for property, or space, or territory, but a lion really eat a cheetah because the cheetah is like it. So that's the same thing with humans. We don't kill babies or torture people who are mentally disabled because they're just like us.
Well, I would have to disagree with you. I think that animals do have a moral code. There are actually elephants, and if someone in their group dies, they actually bury the elephant with leaves and grass. And just as a human being would go back to a dead relative's gravesite, the elephants actually go back to where they buried their group members' bones.
That has nothing to do with morality. That's instinct.
Yeah, but they're more like us than we think.
Yeah, but
That's one species. I mean, that's elephants. We're talking about interspecies, like relationships. So that's just one.
Oh, okay.
There's different audience.
Yeah. Arlene?
Also stated in the Bible that animals were created for us to
Right, to eat, but not to torture.
But how do you kill them to eat them?
You can give them space, just like how Temple Grandin created the slaughterhouses for the cows.
That is not stated in the Bible. They were just made for us to eat.
Right, but
Yeah, but it didn't give you a license to torture them. I mean, sure, go. I mean,
Okay.
it must eat.
Oh, okay. We have a line there. So.
Along the same lines as, like, you know, how elephants mourn and they play together, and crows have learned how to use tools and they play together as well. They will roll around on hills and in snow, and they remember faces of people. There was a story of a man who found a crow when it was a baby, and he nurtured it till it was able to live on its own, and it came back to him every day, and he moved, and he came back to visit to see if the crow would find him, and he recognized him. The crow came up to him and was happy to see him and was letting him feed him. And these animals that people want to say are lesser than them have great capabilities of understanding things we didn't think they could understand.
And there's this discrepancy between the way people treat their companion animals and the way they treat the animals. For food, yes. And Donna, do you want to? Oh, Anna. Sorry, Anna.
On the argument with the Bible, I say that yes, it says, depending on the translation, we're giving dominion over what we have. But we also have the intelligence and the resources to make suffering less. We're also given that. And if you believe in evolution, we also evolved to be smart enough and to develop altruism and compassion. So we shouldn't really strive to be like the argument that animals make each other suffer is a bit invalid because they don't have that. Do you really want to be like someone who doesn't have altruism, who doesn't have compassion, who doesn't have? And I would argue that you can say that that humans never went, you shouldn't treat people badly, that we saw people as equals, but there was a time when people with disabilities and people with mental disabilities and people who were born with certain deformities were treated just as badly.
They were thrown off the cliff.
Yeah, even afterwards, the conditions for asylums were places for the insane. They weren't in the best conditions. For the same reason as slaughterhouses aren't, because we don't want to spend money on someone who's not going to get something that's not going to give it back. And we've kind of come across and seen there's no real reason to possibly. Even now, prisons are kept in bad conditions. And people are lobbying for that. They're saying that you shouldn't have them in those conditions. So if you're lobbying for people who do horrible things and are aware of them to have the basic needs and living conditions, then why not give that same respect to an animal who honestly has no real concept of anything wrong or right?
I want to say something about the discrimination of people with disabilities and people with physical and mental disabilities. Actually, it is true. Even today, people with mental and physical disabilities are discriminated. But the thing is, they have the tools to do many things. The case of Karen. Karen developed lots of good things. For example, she created the tuna paradise. She's able to do things, and she's able to be important in society. And here's my point: can a pig be a scientific?
Well, they have the tools now, but back then they didn't. And also, there's different spectrums to disability. There's autism, for example. Yes, there are children who are able to get savvy skills to do things. There are also children who can't talk. There are also people who have the mentality of a young child. They can't care for themselves. And
the statistics are 0.3 something.
What would you say will happen to those people?
Okay, well, we're getting close to 10:45, so let's hear from Professor Samet.
Whoever you are, thank you. You sort of stole my thunder with your reference to the Bible. Someone mentioned that in Genesis, I believe it's Genesis, the creation story, that God gave humans the dominion over animals, which if you read Genesis 1 and 2, chapters 1 and 2, you will see that. However, more important than that, or equally important, is that God also said we were to be stewards and caretakers of the garden. And so this is our paradise, what is left of our paradise. If we do not take care of our resources and the creatures that we're connected to, we will have no more to consume.
And of course, we had another topic, where it's too late for that, but what do you think about veganism, which is the conclusion of the movie and the implication of the book? Raise your hands. Do you think becoming a vegan would be the solution? Okay. I hope you were convinced today about that. I didn't come here with the notion. But anyway, thank you everybody, and I'm sorry we didn't have time for everything, but thank you. It was great.